day and welcome to Alena Media TV. We are broadcasting from Toronto, Canada. I am Elsa Abraham, and in today's episode I'm bringing you African news. Here is your headlines. US revokes Sudan's terror designation after 27 years. In our next story, Sudanese Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok says Ethiopia's agreed to regional meeting on Tigray conflict. In our last story today, Ethiopian Prime Minister pays a surprise visit to Tigray's capital. Let's go for a quick commercial break. When we come back, we'll get our news in detail. Welcome back from that short break, and now our news. The United States on Monday formally lifted Sudan's designation as a state sponsor of terrorism 27 years after putting the country on its blacklist, the U.S. Embassy in Khartoum announced. The congregational notification period of 45 days has lapsed, and the Secretary of State has signed a notification stating recession of Sudan's state sponsor of terrorism. Designation is effective as of today, December 14th, to be published in the Federal Register, as the U.S. Embassy said on Facebook. President Donald Trump announced in October that he was delisting Sudan, a step desperately sought out by the military-civilian government overseeing the country's transition to democracy. The government designation severely impeded foreign investment needed to survive Sudan's economy after nearly 3 decades of mismanagement under dictator Omar al-Bashir, who was toppled in April 2019. To pave the way for the delisting, Sudan agreed to pay $335 million to compensate survivors and victims' families from the twin in 1998 attacks on U.S. embassies in Kenya and Tanzania by Al-Qaeda, carried out with al-Bashir was hosting the terror group, and a 2000 attack on the USS Cole of Yemen's coast. Sudan's transitional government also agreed to recognize Israel, a major goal Mr. Trump, although Khartoum has sought to downplay the connection. Mr. Trump sent his notice to Congress on October 26th. Under U.S. law, a country exists the terror list after 45 days unless Congress objects, which is it has not. Sudan's delisting will allow the country to be remediated to the international banking system, from which it was cut off as a result of the U.S. sanctions, as well as to negotiate with creditors to relieve or restructuring of its $60 billion foreign debt. Now, moving on to our next story for today, Sudan PM Abdallah Hamdok says Ethiopia agreed to regional meeting on Tigray conflict. Ethiopian migrants who fled intense fighting in their homeland to Tigray wait for their ration of food in the border reception center of Hamdiyat in the eastern Sudanese state of Kassala. Ethiopians who fled the ongoing fighting in Tigray region prepared to cross the Setit River on the Sudan-Ethiopia border in Hamdayat village in eastern Kassala state in Sudan. Ethiopian migrants who fled intense fighting in their homeland of Tigray wait for their ration of food in the border. Sudanese Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok said he had agreed with Ethiopian leader Abiy Ahmed to hold an urgent meeting of a regional bloc to resolve the crisis in Ethiopia's Tigray region. Ethiopia did not immediately confirm Mr. Hamdok's announcement as an emergency meeting of the International Government Authority on Development. He flew to Ethiopia on Sunday for a visit lasting several hours amid growing tensions in the region over Addis Ababa's campaign in Tigray and the dispute over its Nile Dam. The unannounced visit by Mr. Hamdok produced an agreement to revive a joint committee to determine the border between Sudan and Ethiopia after armed clashes there in recent months. The two leaders also agreed to next week resume negotiations on the disputed Nile Dam being built by Ethiopia. There was no immediate word on the resumption of talks from Egypt, which, like Sudan, is downstream from the dam. Cairo has been part of these negotiations since they began a decade ago. Mr. Hamdok was accompanied by a high-level delegation that included many security experts. With him were the Armed Forces Deputy Chief of Staff, the heads of the military and the general intelligence agencies, and the acting foreign minister. Sudan has struggled to feed and shelter tens and thousands of Tigrayans who have escaped fighting in their region since November to seek sanctuary in its east. The number of refugees has reached about 50,000 and was expected to reach 200,000 in months if the fighting continued between the federal forces and the separatist rebels. The presence of so many Tigrayan refugees could drag Sudan into the conflict, which has ethnic undertones and is likely to have far-reaching consequences for the delicate balance between Ethiopia's rival ethnic and religious groups. Analysts in Sudan have warned that the Tigrayan rebels and their leaders would hide among the tens and thousands of refugees in eastern Sudan, which could also be used as a route for arms smuggling into Tigray. Mr. Hamdok, whose long career as a UN economist meant he spent considerable time in Addis Ababa before becoming a prime minister last year, is known to have good relations with Mr. Abiy Ahmed. The Ethiopian leader played a key role in months of negotiations between Sudan's pro-democracy movement and its top generals after the removal of dictator Omar al-Bashir in April 2019. His mediation produced a power-sharing agreement in August last year while considering raising his profile in Africa. But Sudan remains alarmed by the hydroelectric dam Ethiopia has almost completed on the Blue Nile, a short distance away from the Sudanese border. Sudan believes its own hydroelectric dams, especially the one at Roseros, would be damaged if an agreement on filing and operating the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam were not reached. Decades-long negotiations between Sudan, Egypt, and Ethiopia have failed to produce an agreement. Mr. Addis Ababa has insisted that it would only agree to a set of guidelines, not a legally binding deal. The Blue Nile starts in Ethiopia's highlands and accounts for 85% of the Nile's water after it meets the White Nile in Khartoum and travels north into Egypt and all the way to the Mediterranean Sea. Sudan last month suspended its participation in the talks after Egypt and Ethiopia rejected its demand that African water and river experts assume a more active role in the negotiations. Last week, Sudanese officials from the Foreign and Water Ministries briefed the heads of foreign diplomatic missions in Khartoum on the talks. Sudan wanted an agreement that provided it with its full right to gain access to data on the filling and the operation of the dam, not providing that poses great danger to the safety of its people and its strategic installations, and the Blue Nile, said in a briefing statement by African leaders published by the official SUNA news agency. Now, in our last story for today, Ethiopian Prime Minister pays a surprise visit to the Tigray's capital. Ethiopia's Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed paid a surprise visit on Sunday to Mekelle, the capital of the country's northernmost Tigray region. Abiy Ahmed made the trip a day ahead of the resumption of civil services and business activities as announced on Saturday by the interim administration for Tigray regional state. The Prime Minister held discussions with army generals who led a successful law enforcement operation launched by his government in November after the defiant forces of the Tigray People's Liberation Front stormed the army's northern command station in Tigray. The TPLF leadership and commanders of their fighters are now being hunted down and will face criminal charges, including high treason. According to the state-owned Ethiopian news agency, Abiy affirmed his government's commitment to the reconstruction of Tigray and continued to supply to humanitarian aid to people in the region. During the law enforcement operation and ensuring intense fighting, 50,000 people have fled to the neighboring Sudan country. The operation was conducted from November 4th to the 28th, until the regional capital fell to the federal army. Rumors are widely circulating on social media that most of the TPLF leaders were either apprehended or neutralized, but there has been no official confirmation. There is rumor also that former Speaker of the House of Federation, Keria Ibrahim, was surrounded, while former Ambassador of Ethiopia to China, Adi Salem Balema, who held a high post with the TPLF, was also captured. This is where we end today's episode on African News. Please like, share, comment, let us know your thoughts on this particular episode. Make sure you subscribe, hit the notification button so you'll be notified anytime we make a post. Thanks for watching.